Welcome to Meet the Bloggers. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur. We've got a very interesting show for you this week. We're going to talk about the collapse of the middle class. We know we've got a recession, we've got a credit crisis, we've got a housing crisis, we've got gasoline prices going through the roof. But are we really getting stratified as a society into just the upper class and the lower class? And are we losing the middle class? And why is that happening and how can we change it? Well, to help me do that, earlier I talked to Senator Bernie Sanders. Senator Sanders, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm great, Cenk. Great to be with you.
It's great to hear you. I wanted to start with that first question, the most obvious question. Are we really losing the middle class? What is the, I know a lot of folks say, hey, look, we're going back to the days of the robber barons, the few rich folks up top, huddled masses, low income group. But is that really true? What is the factual basis for that?
Well, it is absolutely true. Cenk, a few months ago, I sent out an email to people in my own state of Vermont, and I said, you tell me what is going on in your lives right now. And we expected a few dozen responses. We got over 800 responses, and those responses just broke your heart. And in essence, what people were telling me is that they had believed they were in the middle class. But now, because of increased fuel prices, educational costs, health care costs, they no longer saw themselves in the middle class. They saw themselves economically desperate, just trying to hang on. Nationally, what we have seen since Bush has been president is 5 million people who are in the middle class have slipped into poverty. Median household income has gone down for working families by almost $2,500. 3 million Americans have lost their pensions. Over 8 million Americans have lost their health insurance. The gap between the very rich and everybody else is getting wider and wider. We continue to have by far the highest rate of childhood poverty in the industrialized world, almost 20% of our kids, and all over this country. No one disputes this. Middle-class families are saying, you know what? Unless we change things, my kids are going to be worse off economically than my family is. That's a race to the bottom. That's a collapse of the middle class.
Senator, I tell you, the one stat that really jumps out at me among the ones you cited there is median income falling $2,500 in the last 7 years. That's a startling number. So how did we get here, Senator? How did we get to a situation
what it has
where we're
to
losing
do,
this?
Cenk, what that has to do with the fact is we have lost millions of good-paying blue-collar jobs. We're on the cusp of losing millions of good-paying white-collar jobs. People are working longer hours for lower wages. They're paying more out of their own pocket for health insurance. We have a disastrous trade policy. People are going into debt more than we have seen in decades. That is the reality.
But what were the laws?
The fact of the matter is that right now, pardon me?
I'm sorry, what were the laws that were passed or the regulations that were passed? How did we get here? That's what I really want to identify.
Well, there are a number of factors. I would say that our disastrous trade policies, and that's permanent normal trade relations with China, NAFTA, CAFTA, have enabled corporations all over this country to throw American workers out on the street and move abroad. The fact that we are the only nation in the industrialized world without a national health care program has meant that more and more people are losing their health insurance. Their costs are soaring. The fact that we're way behind Scandinavia and Europe in making sure that college is affordable is a huge deal as well. Not to mention the whole foreclosure crisis where people are getting ripped off in terms of the promises made to them as to what their mortgages would be. So it's a combination of lower wages and increased costs.
So one of the things that I want to concentrate on here is the Republicans always say, well, there isn't enough money. But actually there is. There's nearly $250 million that the Air Force has gotten in spare parts that they're already putting towards disposal. So they're going to throw it in the trash. It's $250 million in the trash. And we know how much money they've spent on Iraq. So the question is, Senator Sanders, why is there always enough money to fight other countries, but not enough money to fight poverty?
Well, Cenk, I think you've put your finger right on the issue. And in fact, we introduced legislation that would just reverse that process. We are spending $515 billion every single year on the military. This is above and beyond the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan. Meanwhile, President Bush has tried to cut back on virtually every program that helps middle class or working families. Meanwhile, on top of a huge military budget, which is rift, absolutely rift with duplication, waste, and profiteering, on top of that, Bush and his friends have given hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars in tax breaks to the wealthiest 1%, and then they want to repeal the estate tax, which would give $1 trillion over 20 years to the top 0.3%. So you're right. If you are rich, they have money for you for tax breaks. If you're part of the military-industrial complex, your Halliburton and all of these companies that get no bid contracts, we have all money for you. But if you're struggling to take care of your kids in America, if you're struggling to heat your home this coming winter, if you're struggling to be able to do the right thing by your family, sorry, we don't have enough money for you. And that is the dynamic of what's going on in American society today.